A warm welcome, everyone, and welcome to another Level Up Webinar Wednesday. I am Audra Mitchell, VP of Group Learning and Development and General Manager of the Massey Learning Institute. And most importantly for today, I'm your host for a session entitled Toy Story, where we'll be focusing on a parent's journey with autism. As many of you may know, during the month of April, specifically April the 2nd, we celebrated World Autism Awareness Day, with this year's theme being Moving from Surviving to Thriving. Autistic individuals share regional perspectives. So this theme emphasizes the need to change the focus from simply dealing with autism to creating an environment in which persons with autism can thrive and excel. Now, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, autism spectrum disorder, ASD, is a developmental disability caused by differences in the brain. And persons with ASD often have problems with social communication and interaction and restricted or repetitive behaviors or interests. Persons may also have different ways of learning, moving, or paying attention. Now, interestingly, CDC states that autism affects an estimated 1 in 36 children and 1 in 45 adults in the United States alone today. So therefore, the rate of autism in all regions of the world is high, and the lack of understanding has a tremendous impact on the individuals, their families, and communities. So to help us with learning more about this, learning how we can play a role in supporting persons with autism to thrive and to excel, because the truth is they are gifted, right? And it's our responsibility to support them and to help them bring out those gifts that they possess. To help us with learning more about it, today we will hear a mother's story. So our presenter, Dr. Debra Bartholomew, is a woman who wears many hats. She's a medical doctor, a passionate patient educator, and I really love that. She's an author, a motivational speaker, an artist, and a singer. But Dr. Bartholomew states that her most favorite, humbling, rewarding, and inspiring role is that of a mother of 2 sons and a parent advocate for her older autistic son. So Dr. Bartholomew, we warmly welcome you this morning and thank you for taking time out to share your story with us. We really look forward to hearing you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I apologize if I look very different to the picture that you had up, but that's also me. When you see me once, you see me once. That's if you see me with the same hair color next couple months. But I'm really grateful, very happy to have been asked. You know, what you said, moving from thriving to surviving, from just surviving to thriving in the environment. That is key, and the key to it is us, society. So let's get started. So I entitled this the Toy Story because I know many of us would have seen Toy Story, would have seen some of the toys and their different attributes. So this is a story about autism and the journey towards acceptance and inclusion. Have you ever met someone so different and yet so endearing that you thought that this person could be a friend or an asset at work or part of your village? What if that person had some quirky behavior? Would that now exclude him? What if you learned that he was autistic? Would that now exclude him? Would you exclude him? In Toy Story, Rex is the most anxious of all of the toys. And as a dinosaur, Rex doesn't have much of a roar either. So Rex is he really part of the team? Can he contribute to a team?
Right.
Let's talk about autism and what autism is. Autism spectrum disorder is a neurological and developmental disorder that affects how people interact with others, communicate, learn, and behave. Although autism can be diagnosed at any age, it is described as a developmental disorder because symptoms generally appear in the first 2 years of life. So autism is a spectrum, right? There are different aspects. There's the filtering and processing of language, emotional sensitivities, physical conditions, motor skills, disability, neurological conditions, and communication. Communication is one of the key things with autism, but that can be taught, okay? But we try no longer to see things like high functioning, and I'll explain why. The functioning labels, we no longer say Asperger's, we no longer say this person has autism or is a person with autism. We use person first language, so we say that this person is autistic or neurodivergent. Autism is not a mental illness, and we try not to. We are pushing forward to minimizing segregation and ableism. Okay, so these are what we use: autistic spectrum, autism spectrum. We use the autistic person or people, autistic community. We talk about the neurodiverse or the neurodivergent person, and move towards acceptance, understanding, assistance, but not just accommodation, but inclusion. And that is the key to someone thriving in today's society. So first, let's talk a little bit about signs. And I don't really like to use the word signs, but things that you may notice. Okay, you know, these autistic children and adults may have particular difficulty in communicating or relating to their peers in particular. Okay, but it could be children or adults. So my son had difficulty relating to his peers, but with adults or with children younger than him, he actually had less of an issue. They may have poor speech, or they may be nonverbal, totally nonverbal. They can be oversensitive or undersensitive to sound, but it tends to be oversensitive to sound, especially noise. And one of the things that I learned, and it took me some time to learn, is that some autistics can have, or many autistics can have, something called synesthesia. So when they perceive one sense, they actually perceive another sense together with that. So for my son, whenever he hears a sound, he sees a color. So can you think of noise and all the colors that and how overstimulating that would be? So autistics can't manage, they have to be taught to manage certain stimuli that overstimulate them. Inappropriate playing with toys. Well, they play with toys the way they in their mind, which is a logical, more logical way of playing with toys. But what you may actually see them is you might see them lining up toys in a particular order. Difficulty dealing with changes in routine. That is a definite issue. Inappropriate laughter or crying, lack of awareness of danger, hyperactivity or passiveness, oversensitive or undersensitive to touch, strange attachment to objects, and lack of eye contact. Well, lack of eye contact, we no longer force someone to make eye contact, but there are certain things like lack of awareness of danger. Those are things that need to be taught in a different way to autistics, because autistics or the neurodivergent tend to be visual learners. And so when you are trying to speak to them, that language is not processed quickly. So I'm speaking to you, and you are processing what I'm saying pretty quickly. You're understanding what I'm saying. But for an autistic, that would be really, really challenging without visual support. So using visuals helps quite a great deal. And in fact, it's a language that they communicate with. So it's important to know that no two autistic persons are alike. Many people think that the autistic spectrum looks like this, where some people on one end are less autistic and some are more autistic. But it's actually more like this. It's a spectrum, okay? And you can have lower issues in one and more issues in another. And like I said, no two autistics are alike. So I wanted to put up this comic. I thought that this comic was really well explained. It really did the trick for me in understanding the spectrum. And this is Archie. And Archie is saying that language can be confusing for me. It takes me longer than the average person to process conversations. And although I am good at making conversations, it can take me longer than normal to respond, because Archie now has to process what you are saying. Remember, his brain doesn't speak the language that you are saying. Now, when my son was 7 years old and he was assessed, his language was above the test. The test measured up to the age of 19 years. So his language was at 19 years or above 19 years. But his processing speed, two of the processing speeds, one was at a 2-year-old's level and one was at a 5-year-old's level. Okay, so think of this enormous funnel and this tiny spout through which all of that language can pass. So you see how slowed down it is, and how frustrating it can be for someone who is neurodiverse. So, but neurotypical people find language confusing too, especially English, and it can lead to some people misperceiving who I am. That is why I would like to explain what is meant by spectrum when we talk about the autistic spectrum. Sometimes when people think of this word, they think of the autism spectrum as being like this. So not autistic or not very autistic and very autistic. A very linear looking spectrum, which gives the impression that people range from being a little autistic to very autistic. But how can you be a little autistic? It's that vague language that I always find confusing. The problem with thinking of the spectrum in this way is that a perception of an autistic person also becomes linear. You're only a little autistic, Archie. You're able to have a normal conversation and act pretty normal, so you're not severely autistic. So why don't you get on with it? That people are told that. And so you see, if someone thinks you're on a low end of the spectrum, this is what happens. You can handle all of this information, new situations. You shouldn't be stimming. All the noise, lack of routines, you can deal with all of that. Why you get organized? Why are you acting this way? Okay, and it's tiring. I don't know how many of you may have seen Big Bang Theory, and Sheldon actually had to go into a room to just be not even just to be himself, to just de-stress, because it was so tiring just to even filter out half of the information, to just deal with half of what he had to deal with every day. And so people can be accused of being over dramatic, or get over it, And if you're seen as being on the high end of the spectrum, they tend to think that you're not worth the effort, or you can't hold a job, you can't do anything, and people think that you're incapable of doing anything at all. But the truth is, as I said earlier, someone who is neurodiverse in some areas of their brain will also be no different to your average person in other areas of their brain. So the autistic spectrum looks more like this. Okay? So some traits create difficulties in everyday life, like motor skills, and some are very useful in everyday life, like perception. Each person with autism will have a set of traits, all in different areas of the spectrum, and the areas where they don't have a trait will function no differently to a neurotypical brain, but may be affected by circumstances. For example, I am good at making conversation, but I get sensory overload in loud and crowded spaces, and then conversations will become difficult. So the story of my own Rex, Rowan. My son Rowan was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and he was rejected from several schools wherever we went. Just before he wrote SCA, I was told that he'd never last a day in secondary school and that he'd never be accepted or properly educated. But at Queen's Royal College, Principal David Simon and his team meant that Rowan was not only accepted, but included. Rowan went on to spend 7 years at QRC, becoming a scout, a member of the scout band, and a school prefect. After school, Rowan took a gap year during which he taught essay writing to autistic students at Palmeiras Learning Center. This is Rowan. So this is Form 1, where he marched for his house. This is on Investor Day when he became a scout. And this, I think, might be Form 3. Funny enough, Rowan's greatest achievement was being asked to be a part of a band made up of his peers. He said sometimes they just talk, and it was so cool to just be a part of that, for someone to actually care what he had to say. And that has helped to shape Rowan's future. He is now a year 1 student at the University of Trinidad and Tobago in the Performing Arts, majoring in trombone performance. And this is Rowan on his first day of university. So how do we include? How do we change the landscape to allow the neurodiverse to achieve their full potential? As I said in my poem, The Band of Brothers, Mr. Simon told my mom, if I pass for QRC, it is here that I'll belong. 2 months later, guess what happened? And since then, his words have never been wrong. He led his staff from the front. I was never left out. He kept his word. I learned along with everyone. My voice was always heard. So what can we do? Well, we can take steps to include the neurodiverse children in our shopping hours, for instance. Offer a 1-hour quiet shopping time for families with neurodivergent children. No music, no crowds, maybe even headphones. Or create social stories shown on air or in the paper, educating those children about what an awesome experience it is to shop at Massey by showing them all that the grocery shopping experience entails. Or even when they come in, as they come into the establishment, you have a billboard with the actual social story played out so that they can see what it is like to shop at Massey. Training and employing disability aid staff with the know-how of supporting neurodivergent children, or maybe even having a quiet room where the neurodivergent or autistic child can stay while their parent shops. But what about adults? Neurodivergent children become adults, and yet there aren't enough spaces for them in society, and employment opportunities are scanty at best. And yet, the statistics show that 1 in every 34 children will be autistic. EY Global, a leading global company, has a division that is staffed only by the neurodivergent. Let me say that again. That company has a division that is staffed only by the neurodivergent. How awesome is that? The neurodiverse may have photographic memory, and because of attention to detail, they are an asset in warehouse management, and they are talented in the world of math and IT, among many other talents. And yet we tend to concentrate on the things, their struggles, and the things that they can't do, or we think of them as less when we should think of them as equal. So what happened to Rowan at QRC? Well, I'll finish with my poem for you. I stand proud yet humble before you. They said I wouldn't even last 1 day, but my teachers and classmates at QRC meant 7 years was my stay. I used to wonder if it was all worth it, the therapy, the tears, the strife. I doubt my worth no longer. My blood is royal blue for life. Guess who this is? That's Rowan in the middle, and that's Tony Paul on his left. Well, on his right, so on the left of the screen, and that's Etienne Charles on Rowan's left, to the right of the screen.
We cannot consider ourselves as having made any sort of progress. So, I am autistic. Specifically, I have something called, what is known as high functioning autism. So, what that means is I'm generally very low support. So I don't really need much help on things. I can talk just fine. I can get up and make my own breakfast and things like that. But a lot of people assume that just because I outwardly look normal in that I don't really need support at all. Just being a partner. So we've got experiences with And likewise, someone who is considered low functioning, so someone who needs a very high amount of support, is considered not exactly worth the effort. So our views on this specifically need to change. So it's as I'm saying this that I'm reminded of a speech that was given at my little brother's graduation by Dr. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. William Faulkner. Right. So he so one day he saw that his daughter was speaking in sign language, and he wondered why she's speaking in sign language, and it was later that he found out his daughter had, I think, a friend, and her parents were deaf, and she was speaking with them. So what Dr. Faulkner really wanted everyone to learn from his speech was that we really just want to be treated like human beings. So all the times, even through the success story, we aren't really seen as being human. We're kind of just seen as, a success story. But behind the success story, there is a person, and that person really just wants to work hard to be seen as the same light as everyone else. So something I quote very frequently is that I have gotten quite a lot of recognition, mostly because of what I have achieved. But we need to remember that as a disabled person, and especially as a disabled person, my worth is not based on what I can achieve. I already have inherent worth because I'm a human being.
So what Rowan is saying in the video is that well, he's basically talking about being high functioning, and why he hates the term high functioning and low functioning, which is exactly what Archie said in the cartoon. But however, the other thing he's talking about is that what he doesn't like is that he's treated as just a success story, and he is a human being, and his successes don't define who he is. The same way that his challenges do not detract from his worth. He has inherent worth as a human being, and it is his right to have a place in society. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Debra. So, Debra, wow, thank you so much for sharing so powerfully and educating us on the importance and reminding us of the importance of inclusion and treating persons that are neurodiverse. First, there's humans who want to be a part, who want to be included, who want to be respected. I've been here busy taking notes on what you've been sharing, and I've certainly learned a lot, and especially even words to stay away from, right? So you certainly have educated and informed us. So thank you for that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to invite Miss Renee Barnett will be moderating our Q&A segment to take over at this point, and she'll be feeding you with the questions, because if attendees are like me, I'm sure they have loads of questions. So Rennie, welcome, and thank you for moderating our Q&A session segment.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Bartholomew. Thank you, Audra. Great presentation, Dr. Bartholomew, very informative. All right, our first question this morning. Can tests be done in pregnancy to detect autism?
No. No. It's not a genetic, it's a genetic condition, but it's not detectable that way. And there's certain, it tends to be the environment and you know, things like that play a key as well. It's not fully understood, but no, tests can't be done. But I'd shudder to think if tests can be done, what people would do, because there's no way my life, I would not trade my life in for the world with the two young men that I have. They have taught me a lot about humanity. And as a matter of fact, as a medic, I knew nothing about sociology. That's not taught in med school. And because of Rowan, I think it should be, because, excuse my French, there are a lot of doctors who have their heads up their own, you know what, you know, because they don't treat human beings as they treat them as a paycheck, you know. And if we all did sociology, we would understand more. Now, one of the things that happened, that came about, and actually Rowan and I have a meeting this afternoon, when he was about to do CAPE, it was taking him 4 days to write an essay, and that was, of course, not going to work. So I actually suggested something, and he saw it was literally just 2 things that I did, and his mind just went click. He took the pen. In 15 minutes, he had a plan for the essay, and for the first time, 3 weeks before the exam, he wrote the exam in an hour, and then he went on to get a 3 in that exam. And since then, he's been using this technique as his language. Anything that he doesn't understand, this is his language. He even uses it for Spanish orals. So this is what he's been using. He's using it in music as well. He's using it for things like stagecraft, which are a lot of, anything that is a lot of writing, a lot of words that is hard to understand. We actually translate it into this language, and he used this language to teach autistics. Just so, if you know, what would I have done differently had I known early on? You know, I shudder to think what a lot of people can do with that information. So no, the answer is no, but yeah, I think those things have to be weighed out really well.
Thanks for sharing that. Follow on from that question. Are you aware then if, let's say, maybe diet or anything in the environment makes a difference in prevention?
Not in prevention, but in terms of provide or lessening the overstimulation. So, for instance, Rowan used to have a meltdown when we lived in India. He used to have a meltdown every afternoon, and every afternoon he would be taken out of the class because they didn't understand what was going on. And then I saw that he wasn't eating his lunch, but I also knew that there's a cafeteria in school and they had to eat in school. So I just figured that he was actually having lunch in school, and I had to do some serious investigation, and I realized that he actually had not been eating at all, because the cafeteria was, I mean, it's India, so the scent was really, really strong of curry, and so it was very overpowering. And so that it wasn't that was creating the meltdown. He just couldn't eat. What was creating the meltdown was hunger. So simple. There's some of the things are actually quite simple. You know, just making sure that they aren't overstimulated and, you know, not tired. They have a visual routine. Visual routine is key, because they won't be able to function fully without the routine. And then the routine becomes internalized, so you don't even have to worry about that. And we all function by a routine, right? We know that we have to go to work Monday to Friday, and we do whatever on whatever days, right? So a visual routine is key. So there are things that actually help to minimize the challenges that they have to deal with, and so make their lives so much simpler. So much so that I actually don't even make Rowan's lunch. Rowan makes his own breakfast. He if he has, depending on his day, he will actually get up and he will actually prepare lunch from the night before. You know, he does a lot of stuff on his own. You know, and if I see him make a cup of hot chocolate, I know that he's struggling with a little bit of anxiety, or that he probably has a little issue getting off to sleep, because that the hot chocolate is part of the bedtime routine from time since time gone by. You know, so it becomes internal. So things like that, strategies like that, help a great deal, but not in prevention, in support, and in helping them to become self-sufficient.
Thank you for that thorough response. So you mentioned overstimulation and the meltdown, etc. So were there other symptoms that you would have seen from him that would have led to his diagnosis? And what age was he diagnosed?
He was diagnosed at the age of 3. The meltdowns were the thing for him, but there are things that he would still. He hasn't had a meltdown in a long time. The last meltdown he had, but meltdowns change, of course, because he's I know, I mean, Rowan will be 21 just now, so the meltdown, yes, so the meltdowns change. But I remember after O levels, he did really well at O levels, and I remember saying to him, suggesting that we have to think about what he wants to do afterwards. And what he wanted to do was, he wasn't sure, and he was thinking, well, maybe based on what his subjects are, maybe he should do IT, because he had a 1 in IT, but that was not offered at QRC. So I suggested to him, well, maybe you go to Fatima, and that meltdown was not pretty at all, you know, because QRC, one, they are very loyal. Autistics are fiercely loyal, and two, that it would mean uprooting him from everything, and I think that's why he needed the gap year as well, because going straight from QRC to UTT was going to be too much of a change. QRC really was a home for him. When during COVID, we actually had to pass by QRC just for him to just feel distressed. And so one of the things you would notice is that they tend to stim. Now, we all stim. It's funny how stimming got a bad reputation because of autistics, but we all stim. We bite our fingers. We may rub our nose. We may play with our hair. We may shake our feet. You know, we may fiddle with a pencil, or keep pressing a pen, but we don't think of that as stimming, and that happens when we're nervous. And so it's the same thing. They stim when they have extra energy or when they're a little bit anxious. And I used to tell Rowan not to stim because I didn't want the boys to laugh at him. And then one day I just noticed that his hands were just, and he stims like, he doesn't flap. He stims like his hands will just go. And I said, I asked him what was wrong, and he said nothing. And then my younger son had come and told me that that no one is to sit on the bench outside the office anymore. And that bench was actually where Rowan sat during the day, you know, if at break time and lunchtime. So the school, Mrs. Simon's secretary, she said to me, I haven't noticed Rowan on the bench for a while. Is everything okay? Is he at school? So I said, but you all stopped the children from sitting on the bench. And she said, but not Rowan. And I said, yeah, but he wouldn't know that because it's a rule and he will follow the rules. And she said, oh my goodness. And so she told the vice principal, and they went and got Rowan and told him that he is the one to sit on the bench. And that's why they stopped all the boys, because the boys were congregating and he was now not having that safe space, that quiet space that he treasured. And so that everywhere an autistic is, they need that quiet space to just de-stress. But it just shows you, you know, that the stimming that we all feel is so bad actually was a language telling me that something was off. So since then I stopped telling him to stim. So these are things that we tend to class as abnormal, but they're not abnormal, they're just different. But we all, like I said, we all stim.
Thanks again for that, for sharing that story and for that thorough response. Greatly appreciated. All right, we have a question here coming through from Alicia. What are the chances of having another autistic child after having one child with mild autism, 3 years old, and another with speech delay, 10 years old now?
Alicia, this might sound bad. The problem is not you. No, but the gene tends to come from your dad, you know, because they're the ones, it tends to be the ones who are the engineers and the math brains, and you know, those are the ones that tend to be to pass on that gene. I have a friend who has 2 kids who are on the spectrum. One is not as severe as the other, and it's tough. It's a real challenge. And I'll be honest with you, I really can't answer that, and I don't think anybody can actually, because I mean, 5 years ago they would have said to me, "Oh, your chances are slim," but now, you know, it's 1 in 34, or 1 in 36, as Audra said. So you know, and there is no gene to check for it. You know, it's a real challenge. The only thing is really getting the right therapy, you know, and probably utilizing different methods of communication. But it's really tough. It's a tough job, that can consume your entire life, you know, because that's what you end up doing all the time. But you know, they didn't ask to be born. You know, we brought them into this world, and that's our responsibility. So,
all right, moving on to our next question. Can you speak more about how the school and the teachers adapted their environments to be more inclusive? Did you provide resources and information?
Yeah, so when every school that I went to, I tried to broach conversations with the staff so that they would understand. You know, like I said, it was a journey of discovery. Has been a journey of discovery. So I actually wrote a poem called "My Dance with Autism," and I said sometimes we waltz, sometimes it is a tango. At first we weren't even dancing. You know, at first our steps were frenetic and uncoordinated, and his hold was like a stranglehold at first. You know, this dance partner that I had that by the name of Autism. But learning to dance took a lot of reading and a lot of observing your child. And one of the things that I found that helped was for instance, going in the kitchen and teaching him and having conversations like that. So anything that worked, I would share with the school. One thing I made sure and I told them was, they needed to have a visual routine. That is key. And there are unfortunately schools and teachers who don't think that that's their responsibility. But having a visual routine is really, really important. Here he comes. Hello. You have to come in a little closer.
Hello.
Hi, Rowan.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good.
He's off to his next class. He's
Yeah.
off to the next class.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So when I say a visual routine, I don't mean a routine of words. I mean, so if it's math, you can draw a compass on a ruler. If it's English, you can draw a scroll with writing. If it's Spanish, you can do a matador. If it's Lego, then you put Lego blocks. And you also teach the child how to communicate using pictures if they're struggling. So you yourself, I taught the school that any changes, especially in a subject that he really liked, that he needed to be counted down. Otherwise, you would see a meltdown. So if you were enjoying something and somebody just comes and tell you, "Hey, time for you to put that away," you would have an issue. So to minimize those things, and we had conversations. One thing that QRC did was, even before the year started, they called in all the staff. So at the first staff meeting, they called myself and Rowan's aide, and we did an educational session teaching them of what to expect with Rowan. And they formed a team, and the team included me, which I thought was really important. So if for instance he had a bad day, I could actually message in the group chat and say, okay, Rowan had a rough night last night and I don't know what to expect. So just, he may need extra breaks or things like that. So teaching them also how to anticipate a meltdown, what they may notice, or what may overstimulate him. Noise, too much noise, things like that. So those things definitely helped. Having that open conversation helped a great deal. And often you would find that having an open mind, so the teaching staff were taught as much by Rowan as much as he was taught by them. That's something that Mrs. Simon has said publicly more than once. So that kind of teamwork is really, really important. But yes, I have gone in and done so much so that at UTT, I haven't actually had to go in yet. I went in, I spoke with the guards, and I just let them know that he's autistic. His advisor knows that he's autistic, and he's the head of the program. But other than that, I haven't found the need to do anything else. He will find himself sitting alone in a corner if he needs his quiet time, or so yeah, I think that conversation is that communication, that teamwork between parent and school is really, really important, and for every child, not just for an autistic child, for every child.
That's agreed. Thank you so much for sharing that. Moving on to our next question. What are your thoughts on ABA therapy?
I knew that question was going to come, So ABA, in its pure sense, as it was, ABA was Autism Speaks, is one of those organizations that champion ABA. And I'll tell you what ABA in its pure sense teaches. It teaches that autistic behavior, or the behavior that you will see exhibited by an autistic, is all negative. That's what it teaches. And like I said, from my experience with stimming, that's wrong. So ABA modified to teach them how to respond to certain things in a different manner, so that they can accomplish what they need to accomplish, fine. But ABA teaching them to modify their behavior such that they resemble a normal, as everyone said, normal in air quotes, or typical person, no. So I am, whilst, and Rowan would have had ABA, I'm telling you, in the past, because that is what was championed, right? But I learned to support Rowan rather than say to him, do not do this. This is not what you should do. You should do this instead, because this is what would get you noticed or get you. So there are certain things, okay, you need to use the bathroom, put up your hand. Yeah, those are things that are things that are typical, but not teaching him don't stim, because stimming is people that is not normal behavior. Or you can't melt down because that people will laugh at you. What we need to do is we need to understand what is driving the behavior rather than concentrating on the behavior itself, and that's what EBA does.
Again, another powerful response. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question here: would you recommend autism sensory headphones for a child who cannot handle loud sounds?
But yeah, I mean, my younger son isn't autistic, and he has noise canceling headphones, so why not? Especially, and so that's why I mentioned in things like the supermarket and stuff, because it can really get, and like I said, if a child has synesthesia and will see, so what Rowan said was he was just bombarded by color. And so every time there's noise, it's two sets of stimulation going on. Can you imagine that? So of course I would definitely recommend. But you have to teach them where, when, and where, because you also want them to be able to communicate. Right? So that's where social stories come in and routines come in. So you would actually do a social story about the headphones, showing them when it is a good time to use the headphones, so that they then become empowered to use the headphones when they experience that overstimulation. So that's what social stories do. So social stories actually, when the social story is about them in whatever situation, and what they do is it's all visual, well, of course, with words. And what they do is they read that social story over and over. And so when they read the social story over and over, they start to internalize it. And so you find that whenever something like that happens, they will actually go to remember what was happening in the social story and gravitate towards that. So they won't need to be retraining them to do that.
All right, great. Thank you so much. We have a follow on here. How many years did Rowan do therapy?
Oh gosh, it was a mishmash, because we traveled a lot. So when we were here in Trinidad, he had therapy. Then we moved to India, and he had quite a great deal of therapy in India. The most amount of therapy he had was when we were in India for 3 years. And then we moved to Libya, but his teacher actually specialized in the neurodivergent. So she was amazing. So it wasn't therapy per se, but she actually trained him in school and helped him quite a great deal. But then when we got back to Trinidad, that was where the difficulty lay, and getting him back into therapy and a system, and it was really difficult. Eventually he was accepted by a small school, and he did have an aide who was amazing, and she stayed with him right through up to secondary school, the end of secondary school, but up until the outbreak, and she would just go in a couple of times just to make sure that he was on top of stuff. I mean, secondary school is a serious challenge, even for a neurotypical kid. So it was yeah. But yeah, I I definitely recommend, you know, having that kind of support. It's important. It's important. It's really, really important in development and understanding, you know, speech, how speech goes, because an autistic, for instance, would ramble on and on and on and wouldn't know how to leave space for someone to then respond. You know, just so many different things that help. Yes, I think therapy is, you know, is really important. And occupational therapy too, because what we think that that autism is just about speech, but there's also physical. So sitting upright for an autistic, and I didn't understand this when Rowan would have to write an essay on a Monday. It would take 6 hours, and I couldn't understand. Part of the challenge was in writing the essay. Autistics can't write essays really well because you're trying to get them to channel in a different language or write in or literally translate into a language that their brain doesn't understand or speak. But also the problem is their upper body strength and their fine motor strength. So they actually have issues writing, and their hands can cramp. And sitting upright is also a challenge. So doing exercises, so occupational therapy, doing exercises to strengthen their upper body, and as well doing things like even doing macrame or lace up cards, or using Lego, playing with clay. All those things help to strengthen the muscles so that they're able to better write.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was actually a question here: how to strengthen weak motor skills.
Yeah, there's a site that that we got a lot of stuff from. You don't get it in the Caribbean so much so as now, but it's called Kumon, and what they had was they had certain things. So for an autistic to color, coloring a large space is very daunting. So what you do is what they did was they would give you an apple, but they would give you only a small white circle in the center, and so what you would do is you'd fill that in. But when you fill that in, you saw the completed apple, as opposed to giving them an entire apple to color, because fine motor skills are so difficult, and they actually get pain when they hold a pencil for too long. So things like building Lego, clay work, lace up cards, so they actually concentrating on building the fine motor grip. Those things help a lot. And the lace up cards literally is just taking thread and lacing, or if they have a shoe, you teach them to lace it up, you know. So, and they do that over and over. So those things help quite a great deal. And plasticine, you see, clay, that strengthens the muscles a lot.
Very lovely. Thanks for sharing that. Moving on to our next question here. Would you say social stories are usually utilized in speech therapy?
Yeah, they are. But social stories can take the form, many different forms. I only learned that recently, and I used to think that social stories, that my son was too big for social stories, but actually, he isn't. So the social stories that you would see from a child, for a child, would be filled with pictures. Yeah. So for instance, I would draw his face. If I said today is Sunday, and I put a sun and stuff, and then I put Rowan, and I put Rowan's face is about to go off to school, and I put school, and I put him walking to school, for instance. So you make it as visual as possible so that he understands. But remember that you're using the words, so the visuals are there to concrete the words, to help with the meaning. Okay. But social stories help. So that's how you will be using it for speech therapy and helping to build his language. But you're also helping. Remember you are also reading that social story together. So you are actually building on conversation as well. Okay, and then later on, social stories become different. They can actually become a poem. So for instance, I did one for one called Fingers for Lunch. and I also did one on, because he was about to do exams and he was struggling with his worth as he was struggling with his worth, thinking that it would be tied up in exams. And I called it these 4 letters, and I taught him, you know, I said to the date, and I put in the date. I hear the bulletin and my mind begins to churn. Will I be sucked into the eddy? My thoughts begin to burn. To burn, they're racing now, racing at top speed, faster than the speed of thought. Will all my work, all my studying, will it all be for naught? For naught, this COVID-19 lockdown has created such anxiety. I was caged, confined, locked away, and it sapped all my energy. So it's also identifying with him, right? Tell me, Mom, was it like this tough when you were at school? I placed my hand on his shoulder and said, son, I'll teach you a golden rule to understand, especially now as times are rough. As you glance upon your mirrored self, tell him that you're enough. You are enough, I tell you, no exam can tell you thereof. 4 letters are important, yes, that's true, but the greatest of these is love. So you use you know, social stories to just bring the point across, and often I would find him reading that, because when I shared that one and Fingers for Lunch, Mr. Simon actually asked me to let him read both of them before exams regularly.
Very interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. Very interesting. I see the time is moving on. Let me see if we can squeeze in just one more question. You had mentioned earlier having to share with persons that would be around him at school, etc., about his diagnosis. What was the reaction of others when you first shared that your son is autistic? The school, the security officers, etc.
Nothing but support. QRC is a very different place, eh? I'll be very, very honest with you. It's a very, very different place. When I went to Mrs. Simon before SEA, I had meetings with different schools to find out what would be their what they would do if a child like Ron would pass for their school. And Mrs. Simon looked at me now. Mrs. Simon has known me. We went to UB together, and he looked at me very, very puzzled. And I said, I was like, he said, what's the problem? And I said, well, my son's autistic. And he looked at me and he said, and so what's your point? And I said, what do you mean? I mean, he's autistic, he has challenges, whatever. And then he said, I don't know that much about autism. I can't claim to know that much about autism, but what I can tell you is if your son passes for this school, it is here that he belongs. And that never changed. That never changed. And because of that attitude, the teachers didn't really have a choice but to adopt that attitude. When he was in Form 3 and he was really struggling with 15 subjects, Mr. Simon allowed him to drop whatever subjects that he was seriously struggling in. You know, so, and he told me when he was in Form 4, he said, I cannot wait to hand Rowan his prefect badge. And I'm like, but this man, was he mad? He even know what subjects, what Rowan going to pass, wherever. He didn't know that Rowan coming back here. And that never changed. It never changed. And I've seen it with other students. There's a legally blind student who his mother chose QRC because of Rowan's story. And he's now in Form 5. You know, so that is for me what acceptance is. Acceptance, inclusion, empowerment. So much so that Rowan actually has formed a group where he meets teenagers who are on the spectrum. He just met one who is really struggling at school because the school really isn't acting as if they do want him, and as a prestige school. And the name of his group is called ABLE, Achieving Beyond Limitations and Expectations. And the watchwords are oh gosh, now I forget the first one. Boldness, acceptance, boldness, leadership, and empowerment. And he said empowerment, that's really, really important. And when you include then you empower, you know. So it's never been, and I'll tell you something funny. Just the other day, I met a priest who was, I've met him before, and my cousin was there. My cousin went to QRC, and my cousin said, and I also went to QRC. And so I said, oh, Father went to QRC? And he said, yes. And he spoke of Mrs. Simon, and he said, how Mrs. Simon, he is severely dyslexic, and his degree is in history. How does a severely dyslexic person do a degree in history? Because history is serious reading. And so it's never been, for that school, it's never been about what you can't do. It's always been about, you know, what your capabilities are, and using what your capabilities are for you to reach your full potential.
Very empowering. Thank you so much. If you can just do 1 minute to just ask this final question, if you could answer it quickly. So this person, they would have entered the webinar late, and she said she may have missed it in the intro, but how were you able to start the process of becoming as involved as you are? Where did you start?
From the beginning. My mother was like that. My mother and father especially, but my mother was like that. She was that kind of a didn't finish primary school, but was always very involved as a parent. So I didn't see it as I saw it as my duty. And if I was in denial, or that would be about me, not about my child. And my child didn't ask to be born in this world, and he didn't ask to be autistic either. So it is my role, my responsibility to learn how to support him. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn more. And doing things that were fun, even though they were therapy, I actually tried to make them as fun as possible, and he enjoyed it. And you know, we have both my boys and I, we have a really, really close relationship. I wouldn't trade it for the world, you know, and that's what parenthood is about, you know. So yeah, I like I said, it was from the get-go.
All right, thank you so much. I hand over back now to you, Audra.
Thank you so much, Rennie, for your excellent job in moderating as usual. And once again, thank you, Dr. Bartholomew, for not only sharing your journey, but also sharing your amazing son, Rowan, with us. He is definitely a success story and clearly an inspiration for all of us. And I mean, and the information that you provided has certainly created awareness on how we can all do our part in helping persons who are neurodiverse to thrive, to excel, and really live truly amazing lives. And I mean, the point that we can't get away from is that the first step really starts with us recognizing them firstly as humans, just like all of us. And we all want to be included. We all want to be accepted. We all want to be loved. And we all want to be given an opportunity to live our full potential and to just bring who we truly are. So Dr. Bartholomew, once again, thank you. To the MLI and IT teams who helped to make these webinars possible, I thank you. To you, our audience, we always appreciate the time you take to join us, to ask your questions, and we are sure that you found this session to be informative and inspiring. So time flies when you're having fun. We've come to the end of another one of our MLI webinars, and please look out for some of our upcoming webinars where we'll be exploring topics such as menopause, dementia, the exciting and maybe scary for some world of AI. And we will definitely be also having a follow-up webinar on Massey's ESG, which we've renamed CARE Initiative. So until next time, please keep well, keep learning, keep growing, and most importantly, remember, we need to all level up. Bye for now. See you again soon.